Walkabout, James Vance Marshall, Chapter 18. The smoke rose lazily, a slender blue-gray column pencil straight. For a long time the children looked at it in silence. Suddenly the column broke, changed to a succession of puffs, in sequence of three, one large, one medium, one small. "They're signaling, Pete." "Yes." The boy looked first at the smoke, then at his sister. He saw that her eyes were shining, her lips parted. In the ashes he traced a pattern with the toe of his foot. "You reckon we ought to answer?" She nodded silently, with the eyes for nothing but the smoke. They raked over the ash, pushing in kindling wood, and soon there rose from beside the bed of pipe clay an answering column of bluish gray, a misty spear stabbing the azure sky. "Fetch a branch, Mary, a big un with lots of leaves." The girl knew what was wanted, something light enough to lift but bulky enough to block off the smoke. Soon their column too was broken into a sequence of irregular puffs. While the boy signaled, the girl watched farther shore of the lake. Suddenly she saw movement. She strained her eyes, but the figure she had momentarily caught sight of merged chameleon-like into the background of lush growing reeds. For a while everything was very still. Then the figures appeared again, three ill-defined pinpoints leaving the large column of wood smoke, coming down to the lagoon. The sunlight glinted on three fountains of spray as the strangers dived into the lake. A second later, three arrowheads of white were moving slowly towards them across the sunlit water. "They're coming, Pete." The boy left the fire, came and stood by his sister, saw she was trembling, took her hand. "Don't worry, Mary. I'll look after you." She squeezed his hand gratefully. "You reckon they're white men, Pete, or black like the darky?" The children strained their eyes as the swimmers came steadily nearer. They swam in a single file, and it seemed to Pete that their heads were black and abnormally large. "I reckon they're darkies, darkies with big heads." The girl nodded. She'd come to the same conclusion herself. She'd expected to be terrified at the thought of herself being naked and the strangers being black. Yet now that the fact of their blackness had to be faced up to, she realized unexpectedly that she wasn't nearly as frightened as if they'd been white. Holding Peter's hand, she stood at the edge of the water waiting. The swimmers came splashing into the shallows. Now that they were nearer, the children could solve the mystery of the size of their heads. They were carrying bundles. The first swimmer was a full-grown male, and perched at his shoulders was a pickaninny, a baby 3-year-old, his fingers clutching his father's hair. The second swimmer was an adult female, a smiling, broad-faced gin. Her bundle was a young warrigal, a half-grown dingo pup, its body draped around back of her neck. The third and last swimmer was a young lumbra, round about Mary's age. Strapped to the top of her head was a yam-laden dilly bag. The man grounded his feet. He waded out of the water and set the pickaninny down. He was a tall man, straight as a lathe, sinuous from head to toe. His hair was straight and jet black. His chest was cicatrized with a V-shaped shoulder-to-shoulder wheal, and he was quite naked. The women followed him. The water glistened on their skin like black pearls. The gin was well-formed, almost buxom. The girl, like Mary, slim, supple, and lithe. The man's eyes were curious. He addressed himself to Peter Warmgala. His voice was deep, yet strangely soft and lilting, like the bush boy's, only several octaves lower. While Peter floundered into conversation, the women turned their attention to Mary. Deeds speak louder than words, and the young black girl and the white quickly came to a understanding. The lumber opened her dilly bag and offered Mary a yam. The gift was accepted, and a handful of bauble nuts offered in return. The gin nodded and smiled. A few minutes later, understanding turned to something deeper. When the pickaninny realized he missed a share out of food, he started to cry, and Mary picked him up. He stopped instantly and started to play with her long golden hair that hung almost down her waist. As the pickaninny cemented friendship between the white girl and black, so the Warrigal, a dingo pup, served as a link between man and boy. For Peter loved dogs. The Warrigal reminded him of his Basenji way back in Charleston. He listened to the black fellow man with only half his attention. His eyes were on the dog. Suddenly, unexpectedly, he went scampering off. The sight of the Warrigal worrying a sycamore branch was too great a temptation. In a moment, boy and dog were joined in playful combat, splashing together in clouds of spray through the shallows of the lagoon. For a moment, the blackfellow man blinked in surprise. Then he laughed. He saw that the women folk were happily sharing food and lay down among the rocks. After a while, he saw the children's drawings. He looked at them casually at first, noting the crude inaccuracies of Peter's koalas and lizards. Then his eyes passed to the girls' pictures. He sat up then, intrigued. He squinted at the hairstyle, seeking in them some clue as to the stranger's race or tribe. He got up and walked slowly down the line of drawings, peering closely at each. And at last, at the very end, he came to the house, to Mary's dream house. One door, one window, one chimney, one pathway lined with flowers. "A-wee, a-wee," he sucked in his lips. The Jinn came across quickly, and together they peered at the dream house. After a while, Mary, still carrying the pickaninny, joined them. They looked first at her, then at the house. "Ah-wee, ah-wee." The Jinn's voice was filled with curiosity, almost awe. She spoke quickly, excitedly, pointing first to the dream house, then to the hills on the far side of the valley. Quite suddenly, Mary got the gist of what she was saying. Hope surged within her. Over the hills was a house, not just a hut such as natives lived in, but a house like the one she had drawn. A white man's house, first stepping stone on the long, long trail that would one wonderful and longed for day led them back to home. Where, oh where? Her eagerness was something the Aboriginals could understand. The black man's eyes were sympathetic. Gently, he took the girl by the hand and led her down the sand beside the lagoon. Peter, seeing them talking so earnestly, left the Warrigal and came and stood beside his sister. He saw the black man point first to a valley, looping aslant to the hills like a tired snake. The black man mimed the climb of the valley, his feet rising, his knees sagging. At the top, he indicated that the children could sleep. He lay down on the sand and snored. The Jinn giggled. Then, with the point of a yucca branch, he traced a line heading east into the rising sun. After a while, the line broke, and with a couple of curves, the black man indicated a hill. Then beyond the hill, the line went on. Soon came another lower hill, and here, the black man indicated there was water. He drew a circle, pointed to the lagoon, and lapped like a dog. He also indicated food, yams. He drew them beside the hill and champed his teeth. Here, too, he indicated sleep. Again the lying down, again the snoring. The children nodded. Next day, the line continued east towards another higher hill. And here, at the base of the hill, it stopped, ended at a house. The black man drew it. One door, one window, one chimney, one pathway lined with flowers. The children looked at each other. The girl's eyes were like the stars of the Southern Cross. "Oh, Pete!" She burst suddenly into tears. Peter looked at the Warrigal and the reeds and the red gums and the glistened expanse of the lagoon, and knew, in that moment, that every detail of what he'd seen in the last 2 weeks he'd remember for the rest of his life. Then he walked slowly across to the fire and collected the last of the bubble nuts. He stood for a moment, looking not at the others, but up and down the sun-drenched valley. Then he went across to the blackfellow man and held out his hand. "Goodbye," he said very formally. The black man grinned, and he too held out his hand. Peter turned to the girl. "Come on, Mary," he said. "Kokura." He led the way along the shore of the lake.